what adventures Arietty had in her painted world. She created marvelous things for the kingdom of Elsewhere. An orchard that grew different kinds of food. All you had to do was touch the bark and think of it, and out from the limb would come whatever vegetable or fruit or meat that you desired. And that way the people there never went hungry. She made for them a herd of white horses, and if you pluck the hairs you might have a good luck or a small wish. And they became fashionable around the town, and even the king would ride one in the streets sometimes. She made for them trinkets and toys of gold and rubies and diamonds that would amuse them for hours. And she made these seeds that, if you put them down in the ground, out would pop a house or a tower, and all you had to do was say, "Be gone," and it would vanish the next moment. Indeed, one of the white pawns and a few of the other little creatures made themselves huge castles to live in, and they would have to get around as best they could, even though they would often be so small that they didn't know what to do with all the space. But she didn't help only the kingdom of Elsewhere. She also went to the Underpeople, and they were an untidy group. It's already been mentioned about the crack in the wall that was leaking the water, but they also had houses that would be upside down or sideways, and they were a lazy group, never doing any work. So she went up to the king of the Mer-people, and she wagged her finger at him and told him that he needed to quit lollygagging around and get things back in place, or otherwise they were going to get hurt, and she wouldn't use her magic unless they did. So the king of the Mer-people, of course, got it all settled back in place, and of course Arietty was willing to help. She also went into the wilderness, and the adventures she had there were so many that I couldn't tell them all in one sitting. And so I will instead say that she had a few friendships there that King of the Dry had, Old Man Willow, and she did her best to civilize these creatures, and it wasn't easy, and she didn't really succeed, but she did try. There was also this place she visited called the Hodgepodge Land, and these were people with big heads that looked human, but they often had bigger eyes, or bigger noses, or bigger ears, or bigger mouths, or maybe they'd have a body part in the wrong place, or just a bit in the wrong place, like an eye way up on the forehead, or a nose down near where the mouth should be. And they were a funny group, and they were afraid of almost everything hiding in their holes, and she had to convince them that they had no reason to be ashamed of their ugliness and to socialize. Indeed, she had to make peace with all of these regions and keep them from fighting amongst themselves, and this wasn't easy. They loved to get into brawls. But she believed that she needed to unify this kingdom and be a good ruler over it. And she made many friends along the way. There was, of course, Bosch, but the painted beast also became her friend after she fixed the jaw of it, and it would often sleep by her bedstead, or it would often follow her around and fight off any creatures that might try to harm her. There was also the king, and even Jan van Eyck liked her, although he wasn't against saying that all of this was going to lead to trouble, and even told her a few times that all of this was a bad idea. But she wanted to go back home and visit her folk and tell them what was going on, and tell them that she was here. But there was a problem, for you see, when she tried to go back through the door in the jail cell, she realized there was an invisible barrier blocking her. And she thought to herself that she had known this the whole time. She didn't know how, and the idea hadn't been conscious, but there was a part of her who knew that that barrier was going to be there, and that she was not going to be able to get home until she had completed her mission, whatever that was. Well, I've spoken much of the good that she did, but I feel it necessary to speak of the bad, and I will explain why I fear doing this in a minute. But she did become angry sometimes at Bosch, who was always wanting a new name. She had already given him quite a few: Bosch, Dolly, Vermeer, Johans, Whistler, and he was always asking for more because he wanted to be more and more civilized. And finally she said to him, "Bosch, shut up! I have given you enough names already. If I were to say your title, I would be speaking it for a whole day. Now, just be happy with what you have." And Bosch began to cry, and she felt bad and gave him some name that she made up. and she even made him a golden crown to replace his top hat and make him even feel more civilized. But there were also times when the people would rise up against her. One time the people were gathering together and saying that she must be a witch and that she was going to destroy the world, and even Jan van Eyck was amongst them. And all these creatures were crowding around saying how they didn't want to be together and they didn't like these societies intermingling. And she became so furious that she just started painting a giant storm cloud. And there was lightning and thunder, and all the creatures were fighting, and they hid back down into their holes or their houses or their towers or underneath the water or wherever they happened to come from. And she actually laughed at this, a wicked little laugh. But she decided that from then on, if she ever wanted to get them away, she would have to scare them. There was also, of course, times when the painted beast would have to fight off creatures for her, and although she never killed anything, the painted beast did get a big carrot out of the vegetable person's nose, and also a few petals off the flower people, and even managed to chop off one of the pawn people's arms and legs, leaving him just a stump, which she had to repaint, of course. But I do want to say that I do not believe she was a wicked person. And I think that any little girl in this situation would have had to have had some level of annoyance, and think of it this way. She was only a little girl, and if you had been put in this place, wouldn't you have occasionally be temperamental? I believe she was a good soul, and that she should not be blamed for what it is. And I know that as an historian, I am not allowed to state my opinion, but I will risk it, because this soul certainly did prove that she deserved it. Anyways, eventually, she found that she was running out of paint. It was bound to happen at some point. She had all the, white gone now, of course, and the brown was gone and the green. But she did have a little bit of red, since it was an unusual color, and she was doing her best to conserve it. But the creatures were becoming angry. They had been given so much that they wanted more. And although they didn't want to fight her, there was beginning to be talk of it. And one night she was sitting up in her tower, and she heard a bunch of noises, and she heard the creatures out there, having a row, and she looked out to see they were fighting amongst each other. And as they fought, they began to destroy all the beautiful things that she had made. They destroyed her orchard, setting it on fire. They threw her seeds in the river. The herd of horses were released from their fence and went bolting out into the wide world. And everything was madness. Even Bosch had been caught up in this and had his fur shaved off and his crown thrown off and thrown into a thorn bush. And the king had lost his spectacles and was running around trying to find them. And even Jan van Eyck was having a trouble keeping them down, and he'd even lost his feather from his hat, and it being revealed when his hat fell off entirely that he had a bald spot. And they were saying that they were tired of living amongst each other, and she said, "Be quiet! I am not painting anything else for all of you. You have all been naughty." And they all began mumbling amongst themselves and said, "You can't do that. You are our creature. You were brought to us, and you belong to us. And we are coming up there, and we're going to take your paintbrush from you and your paint, and you will soon see what kind of world we'll create for ourselves." And they all began to agree about this, and they started trying to break down the gate. And Arietty was afraid, and she ran to her canvas and tried to think what she should do. And at that moment she heard a noise, and she saw Jan van Eyck running up the stairs, and he said, "Arietty, I have ruled this castle for a long time, and I happen to know of a secret passageway to get here. A little place that you have to lift up from the ground, a little lever. It's sort of a door, and with a little bit of ground on top. But I was able to come to you, and I wanted to warn you that these creatures will destroy you and this whole entire place, and you need to get out of here any way you can. Go back to the land you came from." And Arietty said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Jan van Eyck. I don't think that I can. You see, once you go into this place, there's no getting out." "Well," said Jan van Eyck, "I don't know what to tell you. They'll destroy you, and I must confess I've taken a bit of a liking to you, despite myself. I knew you were going to cause trouble, but you are just a little girl, and you didn't know what you were getting yourself into." "Oh," she said, "if only there was a way to escape from this place." And then she said, "Wait, maybe there is. Why, I was thinking about it, and you know what? Just because I can't go forward back to my own place doesn't mean that I can't go deeper and deeper into the painting." And she picked up a canvas, and she picked up that tube of red paint, and she started putting it down. "I'll make a doorway to go into the painting, not further out of it." And Jan van Eyck said, "Well, you better hurry." And at that moment, the door was burst open, and they were coming running up the stairs, and Arietty was painting as much as she could, and finally she made the little door, and she opened it up, and at that moment they came bursting through the door, and Arietty jumped out, and she saw that Jan van Eyck was being pushed aside as the creatures came after her. But now she was in a place where it was much less sparsely painted over. It was just a thin layer, and all the creatures looked very much different, and it seemed like their bodies were having a harder time adjusting to this place. But they were still coming at her, and their eyes were becoming black and long. And she let out a scream, for she realized they were coming apart, and she began to make another doorway out, right into the land, actually, this time. And she pulled it open, and she went deeper in, and the paint became thinner and more dispersed, and so did the creatures, until after her third or fourth they were no more than a whisper, and then even less than that. And she was going now into places where color and shapes no longer seemed to matter. She was going into a place where numbers were alive. And then as she fell down deeper and started making more and more doorways, she realized that she was no longer in a painted world, or at least very rarely there would be anything painted. Sometimes something would come flying by, maybe one of her golden trinkets, or one of the white pawns would fly past her. And then she was in a place where there was nothing but blackness. And she looked down and realized she only had a little bit of paint left, and nothing was there at all. Anyway, she looked around, and she decided that she needed to take a break, and that she had to think of a way out. And as she sat there, she began to cry to herself, and she heard a voice say, "What is wrong, my little girl?" And she looked up to see a creature up above her, and it was a beautiful white shining thing, almost as if it was made of robes. But again, it was so beautiful, and it looked down at her with wide black eyes, and she said, "Oh, I've become lost in the painting, and I don't know how to get out and go back home. I've made a mess of things." And the creature said, "My child, you have done all that you can for them, and they have wanted far too much. But I suppose you can't blame them, and I can't blame you, for you were only trying to do what was right." "Yes," said Arietty, "and look at how much trouble it caused." "What exactly are you, by the way?" And the lady said, "Oh, why, I am the Fading One, the Muse, the creature that rules over all of these layers. But you must not think me a god, for I am not, I'm afraid. I was created by the god of chaos. He was created me long ago as a little secret away from the man in black. I have done my best to rule over this place, but it is not always easy. I think that somehow you and I have connected ourselves together, and that is why you can see me here. Me and you are connected by the heart." And Arietty thought about this and realized that must have been the reason why she knew that that doorway wasn't going to work. And she said, "Well, I can only travel deeper and deeper into the painting. Even if I wanted to go home, I can't. I suppose I'll have to spend the rest of eternity with you." And the Muse said, "Well, perhaps. But then again there may be a way. Arietty, you see, the further down you go, the more things begin to make less sense. And the more things begin to make less sense, the more control you can have over them. I think that this place is a place where you are in complete control of everything. You have reached the central core of existence, the mind. And now, if you wanted to leave, there would be nothing stopping you, no bars holding you back." Arietty said, "Do you really think that's possible?" She said, "Of course. Think about it. It makes complete sense. The further down you go, the more things become what they are, and not what they seem." Well, Arietty thought that this made at least a little bit of sense, and she said, "All right, I'll create a doorway and get out of here." And so she did. She painted a little red doorway with a little bit of paint she had left, and she even had a little bit even left in there, only maybe just a bit on the side. And she said, "Thank you so much, Muse. I caused a lot of trouble here, but I promise that I won't interfere ever again with these things. After all, divine intervention I don't think has any place in the world." "Oh, I wouldn't say that," said the Muse. "Think of all the good you did. I think that it's just a matter of doing it in the right dosage, you know? The universe needs a mind. It keeps it good. But too much, and the world falls into chaos. Well," she said, "make me a promise that you will take care of these creatures for me. And here," and she dropped down the paint and the paintbrush, "maybe one day give them this too, when you feel that they're ready. I think that I'm ready to go back to the place that I'm meant to be." And she opened the door, and as she looked back at the Muse, she couldn't help but feel that the two of them would always be connected, somehow, even in the world that she was going to. And as she entered her attic and closed the door, she noticed that the door was a part of the attic wall, and that it had become a painted thing again. As she looked around, she could see the light still shining in the canvas, and she heard her parents' footsteps coming up the stairs, and they opened the door and said, "Arietty, we heard a crash. What was that?" And she said, "Oh, parents, I'm so sorry that I've been gone so long. You see, I went into the painted world and had all sorts of adventures there." And the parents didn't understand what she meant. And she soon realized that in the painted world, things happened at a static state, at a pause state. It actually makes sense when you think about it. A painting, nothing really happens in it, it's just one particular scene. And so it makes sense that if you come back into this world, no time will have passed, while in that world maybe 1 billion years would have passed. Well, anyways, Arietty was though glad to be home, and she told her parents how much she loved them, and she should have been forgotten by history. She should have been lost. But as it happens, she is now a painter here at the Fireside Tales, who, of course, took an interest to her for obvious reasons. She's made many great pieces for us. But I do not know if she goes back into her paintings. That's something I'm not certain of. There are some here that theorize that she does, but we have no evidence one way or the other. And I suppose in the end, the flood of time will come, and her paintings will be lost to even the Fireside Tales, and it will be lost Tom Sawyer and Lolita and all the adventures that the people of this world cook up and all the people of the other worlds. Time will destroy it all. And what will remain? What will it all have meant? I do not know. But it was a pretty picture, wasn't it?